Anas Sarwar is Labour's leader in Scotland, and he joins us for the first time this morning. He's in Glasgow. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Laura.
The party's announcing plans tomorrow to give members of the public discounts if they sign up to having clean energy projects like wind turbines or solar panels in their community. How would that work?
Well, we want to use the strength of the UK Treasury to legitimately deliver a green revolution in our country. And our plans are rooted in four key principles. The first is more jobs, not less jobs. Second, lower bills, not higher bills. Third, greater energy security and less reliance on imports from despotic regimes like Russia. And fourth is climate leadership. I want Scotland to lead the world and the UK to lead the world in the green revolution. And that's why through GBE, the Great British Energy Company, we will make those strategic investments to make sure that we realise that ambition. And that's partly partnering with local authorities, devolved administrations, parliaments, our regional mayors, for example, as well as those larger scale strategic investments so we can leverage in the industry so we can genuinely deliver that transformation that's good for the North East, good for Scotland and good for every part of the UK.
Now
What's interesting as well is that actually I've spent this afternoon reading and researching about the Labour plan. Actually, I think it was a report by Toby Helm from stuff that's been put forward by Ed Miliband, which I will go through after this interview. It's actually much better than you think it is on some levels, right? But the problem is that the messaging on this is terrible. The messaging on this is absurd. Like, talk about, well, the GB Energy is going to make strategic investments, which literally saying, well, it's just a slush fund. The investments that they're proposing, I mean, the issue with them is that they're not big enough. They're not doing enough investment, right? The kind of things they're investing in actually sound pretty good. So there's like a £600 million for funding in local authorities and low interest loans for communities to create local community-owned renewable power generation. Now that's fine. That like local, like consumer cooperatives who own local energy, like local renewable energy. That's a good thing. That's putting the ownership into people's hands, which is what we wanted. That's the kind of Preston model type stuff that we should be getting. But of the 300 or so councils in the UK, like 1 billion means like £3 million worth of funding for each council, which is basically nothing to be able to get these kind of projects off the ground. So that's the issue really, is there's not enough funding. There's also a couple of things, like what they're planning on doing is by putting strategic loans in place for local authorities and communities to create locally community-owned energy generation. That then gets sold to the general mix of energy on the power grid, on the national grid, who then make a profit on that because the grid is privately owned. Then gets sent to the supplier, who then also makes a profit because they're privately owned, being sold back to you who generated the energy in the first place. So whilst you're making some money, which is going to get fed back into lower council tax bills and further council investment, although you'd think that they just want to lower bills because that's the electoral advantage they gain out of this. So what they'll be able to do by using the council-owned renewable energy projects, so making money selling energy to the national grid, they can pool all of that and then reduce council tax bills. Or so what that'll mean is that what I'm expecting is that people will see like a GB Energy dividend as a deduction on the bill, the invoice they get for their council tax. So the problem, that's what I'm saying. There's not a kind of an electoral thing. People aren't seeing like front end, you are buying your energy from GB Energy. It's not a supplier. It's barely even a generator. Like the locally owned projects will be generating. GB Energy is just going to be a fund for supplying the investments. It's not a publicly owned company. It's just an investment fund, really and truly. And then the other strategic investments will be in the private sector. So you'll have large scale projects across the country, which are just going to be making money for the private sector investments rather than properly keeping it in-house to keep bills low, strategically low. Which they could do if they started nationalising things like the grid, stopping them taking a cut, or having a state-owned energy supplier, again, which wouldn't take a cut, or would take the cut and use that to lower bills, for example. It's not doing any of this stuff. So it's the beginnings. It's like the opposite. It's the whiff of good policy, and that's what's frustrating to me. Is that look at like even points out in this article here. You look at places like Denmark, where we're seeing like 50% of energy being generated by consumer cooperatives, community-owned energy generation. And I think that's a good thing. There is an incentive for Labour councils who are more likely to take up these projects because they're Labour style to then do that to incentivise their own residents to get involved to reduce their council tax bills. And then suddenly you've got this electoral situation where people are more likely to vote Labour at local elections because they will have lower council taxes because of the amount of money that's being sold to the grid by whatever project's being done and managed by the community. So that's why they're doing it. It just needs to be on a larger scale. It should be a much, much larger scale than what we're seeing. And we also just need to see nationalisation of the grid. And, I mean, you could nationalise the suppliers, but at the moment capping the supply rate at 2% profit seems to be working, I guess, okay, because Ofgem set the prices regardless. What it does do is crowd out competitors on the supply end. Because we did have, in Nottingham, where I live, we did have a council-owned supplier called Robin Hood Energy. But because they've created like a renewable internal market, where if you're a generator who sells renewable energy, you have these certificates that you can then sell to different suppliers for to show that they have contributed to the renewable energy by buying these plants, because you can't choose what energy you buy because the grid is not nationalised, and it mixes all the power up and you just buy power back from the national grid, which is so silly that you then, to get a renewable energy mix, you have to have bought enough of these renewable energy certificates. And the locally owned, council-owned energy supplier in Nottingham couldn't compete to buy these with the private sector, because if they put any more money into it, they would have been stopped by the EU state aid laws and competition laws for using state money to try and undercut the competition by injecting more funding than would break the competition conventions. And so they went under, and it cost the locals like £38 million of council money on a failed energy project because they got beaten out because the private sector had so much venture capital involved, they were able to crowd out the smaller competitors. Again, there's just no point in having this private market for energy supply when the prices are capped anyway, so there's no incentive to there to be any competition between the energy firms. And it stops smaller competitors getting involved in the market as well. Just nationalise it. Nationalise the supplier, nationalise the grid, have generation in the hands of some state provision, some local provision, some community-owned provision. And then suddenly you create a far more equitable system and also lower bills as well. That's why I'm so frustrated. Because there's some good things here. It's not a terrible plan that's going on here. Putting powers into the hands of local communities is a good thing. That's what I want to see. But it's being hampered and hamstrung by terrible privatisation elsewhere in the economy. And yeah, you're right. Absolutely. About GB Energy, this could be from the article that you linked. Like they will be investing jointly in ventures with the private sector. So on the large scale, what we're seeing is you'll see these public-private partnerships, which again can't reduce the bills because as long as it's privately owned, at least to some degree, they still have to maximise revenue for the private shareholders. They can't keep bills low strategically. They can't keep the price that's being sold to the national grid low strategically because they then can't fail fiduciary responsibility to the private sector investors that they're getting engaged with. It's just so much less efficient than nationalising it overall. Without planning reform, isn't this all just bollocks because of the NIMBYs and Lib Dems? Well, I think what they're trying to get around Big Al by saying, look, if you let us build in this area by not being NIMBYs, we'll give you money back on your council tax because it will be used to give you money back. And I think that's a good way of getting people to try and support the new community-led projects. I don't think that's bad necessarily. Getting communities involved, them seeing the dividends, them seeing the lower council tax bills, will create, as far as they're concerned, it'll create more Labour councillors. And it will sort of get round some of the NIMBY stuff by saying, look, even if it might affect your house price somewhat, they're going down regardless. We're going to give you further investment into a local project that's benefiting you by lowering your bills overall. But not their energy bills, just the council tax bills. If you want to lower the energy bills, you should have the whole infrastructure needs to change. You need to have mass investment on a national scale rather than just small projects here and there with £1 billion worth of funding for the entire country. Right? It needs to be bigger than that. That's the issue. You're right, Kev. How you doing?
All sounds great, like you're promising milk and honey coming out of all of the taps. But, you know, this week, the Labour Party actually slowed down its promise to invest £28 billion a year in the green transition. So why should anybody believe that you'll stick to any of that when you're not sticking to your first spending commitment on it?
I actually think that what Rachel Reeves set out in the last week demonstrates that we're serious about it, because
Because you're going to spend less money.
No, because we are being realistic about the economic circumstances we're currently living in, and the economic circumstances that we may inherit from this disastrous, economically illiterate Tory government. When we first announced this policy 2 years ago, the interest rate on foreign borrowing was much, much lower from what it is today. So we have a deliverable, well thought through plan that is actually going to transform the country. We're talking about almost £100 billion of investment. But I think it's really...
And again, the issue is they're still going with the same line, that if we make these fiscal deficit expenditures, it will increase interest rates. I'm like, no, you'll decrease inflation by increasing the supply. If inflation is lower, then the MPC, based upon their mandate, will keep interest rates low, or will lower interest rates, because inflation will have gone down, giving them the mandate to lower interest rates to stimulate the economy. I'm just infuriated by the level of economic discourse that's been going on today.
Really important to stress that this green transformation is not going to happen just with government money alone or government action alone. It's only going to happen if we partner with the industry. That's partly the oil and gas industry in the northeast, but also partner with local communities across the country to deliver local benefits around the green transformation. We've had over a decade now of big promises from both a UK Tory government and a Scottish SNP government that somehow...
Speaking of big promises, right? Obviously, there's the big promise about the 28 billion that's now down the drain. There's yet another pledge that's been broken from Sir Keith, and that they are now they're retreating from their North Sea oil pledge. So they were saying before that they were going to revoke the new license that was being touted for the Rosebank oil and gas field, and they have now U-turned yet again on yet another policy. Not technically a record, because the U-turn on EU nationals voting was like less than a week. So it's 3 weeks is longer than usual that it takes them to row back on a policy, but still yet another U-turn on important policy areas.
How we were going to deliver the Saudi Arabia of renewables in Scotland. It's not happened, it's not been delivered. Labour's not going to miss that chance.
But
this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance.
But the government's already got proposals to advance a scheme where if people want a wind turbine in their area, in order to get discounts or to get money back for their community. So why is this any different?
Well, look, it's a completely different scale. What you're talking about right now is little small pots of money and little strategic announcements to get the headlines and to get the press release, rather than actually doing the hard work to deliver for people across the country. We were promised that in Scotland, for example, and we've seen the government patently fail to deliver that transformation. So this is a complete rethink, because we're running out of time. We have a climate emergency, and we have got to deliver it really quickly and really significantly if we are going to confront both the cost of living crisis, but also the climate emergency, the global climate emergency we see right around the world. And I honestly believe this is a big, bold, transformative package that we'll be announcing tomorrow that's going to be great news for Scotland, but also great news for the UK and great news for the planet.
But part of this, though, people look at and think maybe there's some quite nasty news in it too, and there could be a risk to jobs as well as very big costs. Part of Labour's plan is not to grant any new licences for oil and gas. Now that affects particularly the huge North Sea industry in the north of Scotland, and we've spoken to one of the union bosses, Gary Smith of the GMB. Now he's got a lot of concern. Do you accept that stopping granting new licences for oil and gas will inevitably mean closures of platforms and job losses?
Thing is, the issue here, the correct answer to this question is we're going to have a comprehensive reskilling program to move current people from these jobs into well-paid green jobs through the funding that we're going to be supplying towards this green transition. That's the correct answer. So let me see if they do it.
No, I don't, but I'm really glad you asked the question, Laura, because it's really, really important that we stress this point, particularly for those people that work in the oil and gas industry in the northeast. There is not a suggestion of any cliff edge. There will be no cliff edge. There'll be no turning off of the tap. We are clear that oil and gas will play a significant role in our energy industry for decades to come. What we're talking about is building the strategic partnerships in order to actually deliver the green revolution. And I want to be really upfront about this. We need the oil and gas industry, all those businesses, the scale of the investment that they're able to make, to partner with government to actually deliver on this objective. And that's what you'll have, a genuine partnership.
But can you guarantee that there won't be job losses? Because it's a simple logic, isn't it? And you know, and investors hear that there won't be new licenses, they will look elsewhere. That is likely to accelerate closures. That is likely, ultimately, to cost jobs. You can't guarantee there won't be job losses.
So look, I've met with leaders of the industry this week, and I was really, really clear that we will honour all existing licences. Any new licences that are issued between now and the next Labour government, we will, of course, honour them as well, because that's partly...
Apart from the ones that were honoured but haven't gone ahead yet, you're not going to revoke those, unfortunately. But you said you would on the 28th of May, but you've now rode back on, so... He went with we need to guarantee the businesses. Exactly, it's very frustrating. He's still going on about the businesses rather than the workers. That's the issue, right? And Laura Kuenssberg is trying to get him to talk about the workers specifically, and he's not even talking. He's not even acknowledging the fact that it's the job losses. It's the important bit here.
Important for the industry to make those investment decisions, but also we do not want to open up a UK government to perhaps big compensation claims. So what we're talking about is building that genuine partnership for the transformation, and I genuinely believe that this is deliverable. I know it's good for the North East, I know it's good for Aberdeen, I know it's good for the UK. It's a positive plan, a transformational plan, and one we're going to sell with confidence.
And Asarwa, it's the first time we've had you on the...
Yeah, literally, just we'll have loads of highly skilled engineers to be able to work on green projects. We'll be able to give them better paid, highly unionised jobs in our green industrial revolution plan that we've got going on. Create that prosperity through these increased jobs that we've told you is the main focus of our green prosperity plan. And he's like, no, in fact, we're just going to make sure we protect the businesses who drill the oil in the North Sea. Brilliant, great answer, love it.
The show, and happily for you, it's on the day that the Sunday Times puts Labour ahead of the SNP for the first time in a very long time in Scotland. It suggests you're going to win 26 seats at the general election in Scotland. Is that realistic?
Look, first of all, I'll say it's feet firmly on the ground. Of course, it's good news, it's positive news, but we're not complacent. We've still got a hell of a lot of work to do to persuade people across Scotland and across the country that the Labour Party is ready to serve and ready to deliver a transformative Labour government.
But is that realistic, that number of 26? I mean, is that anywhere on in your wild,
look,
is that a wild imagination, or is that something you might hope for?
Well, look, 2 years ago when I became the leader, we were 32 points behind the SNP, and if you had told me then that 2 years on we'd be neck and neck with the SNP.
This is the Scottish Labour leader, right? Absolute fucking, he's got heaps of charisma. What are you talking about, Kev? Scottish Labour doesn't come back anytime soon. They ignored Scotland for too long. I think when the SNP stuff blows over, the polls will normalise again, and I think SNP will still win. But I think that in Holyrood, it's going to be very tight on who has a majority, the Unionists or the Nationalists. In Holyrood itself, in the devolved Parliament.
In the opinion polls, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have believed that we're close to them. I wouldn't have believed that we were neck and neck. But I think something different is happening in Scotland. I think there is momentum with the Scottish Labour Party. I think there is a mood for change. But as I say, I'm not complacent. I think people have understood that they want to get rid of this economically illiterate, morally bankrupt Tory government. But I think they're also growing.
One problem with renewables is storage, but one option is to use excess renewable energy to make ammonia, which can be made from Aden water and can be pumped around the country, which require people to know about pipelines, like, oil workers.
More and more out of touch with this incompetent, dysfunctional SNP government. But as I keep stressing to people, the easy part is saying why your opponents deserve to lose. The harder part is setting out why you deserve to win.
And
I'm not complacent about that for a second. I'm going to work day and night to persuade people to positively vote Labour, not just vote against the Tories or the SNP.
But it's interesting. Last week, Alan Cumming, the actor and a very prominent Scot, said in this studio that actually Labour looked like Tory light. And there are a lot of people on the left of your party around the UK, not just in Scotland, who look at, Keir Starmer's promise to ditch tuition fees. That's gone. I know you've got a different position in Scotland, but whether you look at what some people see as watering down some of your climate investment, and there is a kind of It's not really the Labour Party. What do you say to them?
Well, look, first of all, in terms of those people that are ardent SNP supporters, of course they're going to want to attack the Labour Party. Of course they're going to tarnish the Labour Party because they know that the Tories winning again is perhaps the only way they can resuscitate their own party here in Scotland. Hamza Yousaf's already said, it doesn't matter if the Tories win again across the UK. Actually, it really matters.
No, they don't care about Tories. What they want is for people to vote for them instead of you, because the SNP are rolling on a more progressive line and a more progressive platform than you are, right? I mean, literally, Douglas Ross is telling people to vote for you because of how similar you are to the Tories to beat the SNP. Why do you think the SNP are going against you, Anas? It's so obvious.
If the Tories win again, and that's why Labour is determined to get rid of this rotten Tory government. But I also say to people, look, I didn't join the Labour Party for us to be a protest movement, for us to keep losing elections but still to wake up in the morning happy that we are ideologically pure. I am in the Labour Party. People support the Labour Party because they want the Labour Party to be a party of government so we can actually do things for the country positively in line.
Apart from, or do nothing, as you're planning to do at the moment, apparently.
With our values. That's a positive, that's a good thing, and Keir Starmer has transformed the Labour Party in the last 3 years. I hope people can see we've made significant change in Scotland, but we've still got work to do. We're not complacent about it, and we're determined to do that work.
Okay, and
it's literally the same line of just like, did you even answer the question, to be honest? You just said, well, actually, you know, we like winning elections and we want to change the country. Okay, brilliant. Explain why you're very right-wing Q on this stuff, where, you know, people are absolutely disgusted at the kind of stuff that has been you turned on by the Labour Party. And it's like, yep, tough shit, you know, this is what we have to do to win elections, when, you know, the thing that people are being turned off is just by how identical you are to the Conservative Party. People are genuinely being turned off and moving to Liberal Democrats because of it. Another right-wing party, no less. Trust me, we can see what Keith has done to the Labour Party. True, very true. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.